So actually, I'd like to thank every one of you and of course Dave at NCET for the kind invitation to share to this Zoom full of business owners. And it's always wonderful to see my friends and then to meet new people, especially now that we're distancing a little bit. It's kind of fun to have a little bit of time to visit and see how people are reacting and how they're working through some of these issues. I am Marie Gibson. I'm a business consultant, and I help the business owners create, fine-tune, and actually then troubleshoot their accounting systems. Over the last several years, we've seen the prior expansion of our businesses and our growth with our economic diversity, and that we've seen already that some businesses have converted for many years to remote working capabilities. It allows multiple users to access the same software from different geographical locations and/or different time zones. And we even access our software remotely when we travel on vacations. Now, with the rise of the pandemic and what appears to be a bit of a continuing pandemic and the possible work from home scenarios, this digital access question, or what we might even call a remote access question, has now truly become a work from home question. And as more business owners themselves are working from home and then asking their employees to also work remotely, they're wrestling with how to use the QuickBooks Desktop software digitally, or if they instead need to adopt the QuickBooks Online, it's called QBO, cloud-based version. And because of my consulting work, I'm often asked my opinion of the software versions and which one's more suitable for which business. Now, this presentation pertains specifically to the QuickBooks software. However, business owners could use it as a conversation to frame that dialogue with regards to other financial software packages as well. You could actually use this conversation to even address your work from home conversation. So there's always negatives to any discussion, and we're going to try to stay on the positives, exploring what the scenario looks like. Now, at first glance, many of you, and it appears that many people might think the decision is an easy one of the easiest ones that you're having to make right now as a business owner. And we've had some difficult times. Nevada's gone through some rough couple of months, but this decision actually requires more consideration than is readily apparent. And what I found is that business owners can overthink and overcomplicate aspects of their business, especially when it comes to accounting. However, then sometimes when the business owners are facing very complex decisions, they don't even know what they don't know. So they might even need help clarifying on which questions to ask, which questions are relevant, what would be the ultimate ramifications of making these decisions without considering all of the potential results and the consequences. For instance, just to start us off, is this decision a permanent work from home exercise? Or is it a temporary Band-Aid until you can go back to normal? Or is the work from home situation a totally different conversation that needs a different focus altogether? Now, I'm just glad that several years ago, my partner and I dissolved our firm, which had 9 employees. And I've personally worked through this scenario, this discussion in my head, trying on several different scenarios as I try to wrap myself around what the decision-making process would be if we still employed those people and we had to move them out of our suite of offices and into their own homes. Now, nationwide, there are managers of companies who've already implemented this work from home decisions, right? We find their suggestions, we find their tips, their tricks all online, and we try to evaluate them. And many of these standard tips and tricks suggest that you know, the generic 4, write policies, find mentors to help you, realize that you're not simply duplicating your company office to become home offices. And then, of course, make sure you don't assume that your employees automatically know how to work effectively from home. Now, this webinar is going to frame these tips, tricks, questions into 6 general categories that help make this decision easier. We're going to give it some structure and some substance. That sounds like somebody in accounting, doesn't it? So first and foremost, we'll have the discussion of digital access, which is actually the technology. What is the technology that we're going to be looking at? We're going to touch briefly on management issues. We're going to throw out a few questions and suggestions on accommodations. Even communications becomes an issue. Security, I'll touch on just briefly. And then ultimately the variations in the software itself. Some of you have shown some curiosity about that already in our discussion. So when we are making decisions about our business and its accounting functions, it's great to have a clear picture of what exactly we're discussing. And I like to use these visual aids. So I love visual aids. People can see them, they can understand them a little bit. It's not just a verbal going back and forth. And these functions that I have up here on this slide may or may not be different departments in your business. They might be multiple employees in your business. They might be one employee. They could even now still be in limbo. Some of us haven't been able to go back to work the way that we have before a couple of months ago. But we still need to know what activities and or what we might call the functions that we need to be concerned about. And in this slide that I'm looking at has the accounting system as the hub. And of course we have HR and payroll, the operations, the purchasing, the sales. People don't often think about that whole picture of what accounting encompasses, but it really is the hub of these activities that are going on in our business. Now, even as we start having this conversation, there are basic questions that arise. We start analyzing this decision. Where do I even start? So at the very basic, the very lowest level, I'm going to encourage you to use this very brief list as your foundation. And then brainstorm. We can brainstorm now or we can brainstorm later, but we would add questions to make this your own list. And for those of you who are not familiar with NCET's webinars and presentations, NCET makes all these presentations and PowerPoints available. So they're available to you free, use them to your advantage. My PowerPoint's going to be there. You're welcome to use my notes. Anything that's in these slides, it's yours, right, for just attending this time period that we have together. But, you know, basic questions as we start going through our mind is, does your company need a 24/7 availability, accessibility to our software, right? Does your outside accountant, or as Lou had mentioned, the bookkeeper, need that access? How many employees and which employees need access on a regular basis, occasional basis, intermittent basis? The owner, does the business owner actually travel? Are you going to start travel right now? Of course, we don't travel a lot, but we start traveling. We start traveling locally, or we traveling nationwide or overseas. Do you want your software available through web or phone, right? My phone app. On occasion, I get online with my phone and help a client with something that they're having trouble with. So what specific functions are we going to need? What apps? We're going to be covering and looking at all of these today in this brief 45 minutes. So we want to talk about our communications and our management. So again, this is the very tip of an iceberg, and we need to flesh this list out more thoroughly as we go forward. So when analyzing that digital access to the software, what does that mean? What are we talking about? And so there are 3 main options that we're going to consider. One is called hosted software. One is called remote access software, and one is cloud-based software. Okay, so those are the 3 components we're going to look at right now. And you may not even have thought through or know what these terms mean. So if you are a current user of the QuickBooks Desktop software, and this is the software that's normally loaded into your laptop, it's normally loaded into your PC, it could be loaded into your Mac, but it's a download. you would have bought it, purchased it from Intuit. Intuit's the makers of the software. You would have downloaded it. It's in your computer. That desktop software can then be hosted up in the cloud through a subscription from a hosting company. We kind of pay rent for hosting it up there in that cloud. So basically your software license is provided to your hosting company, which charges you then a monthly access fee. It's like going down to a storage unit and renting a storage unit. You have an access fee, a code. And each user has their own username and your own password. The subscription fee is charged per user, and it can be somewhat expensive. However, keep in mind that all your software subscriptions like Word, Office, Excel can then, that belongs to a company, is then licensed to use and can be hosted usually for a smaller nominal additional fee, right? Usually it's the base fee that's higher, and then as you add different software subscriptions, it goes up. So I did clip. I love to go online and clip pics. I think it helps. Again, people are very visual. We're very visual learners. And this happens to be Intuit's hosting program. So these particular, and again, you don't need to be taking notes and jotting all this down, right? You don't need to be like, oh my God, she's going over this too fast, because all of this is made of it. There's no lockdown. You have these PowerPoints and they're yours to use. But Intuit has a standard hosting program which provides you security that these are legitimate companies who are going to protect and secure your software without doing anything weird with it. And again, I'm not going to read through all those names, but you can look those up and find them when the time comes, if that's what you're looking for. Now, some of my clients often ask for pricing examples, right? And so this is a hosting company. It's called Right Networks, and Right Networks was one of Intuit's premier hosting companies for years. They still are. They enjoy a advantage when it comes to referrals from people that have the desktop software in the cloud. And I took a quick snip about a month ago when I started preparing for this conversation. And you can see that basically if you have a QuickBooks Desktop and you have the subscription for hosting in the cloud, it's $57 a month per user. And then if you add the Microsoft Excel, and I always find it fun, people think that if you use QuickBooks, you would never use Excel. Oh, we use QuickBooks and Excel a lot. So again, it didn't surprise me that it's packaged with that. Again, you can see the nominal increase in the pricing. And then if you put the whole Microsoft Office, unlimited access for storage. So again, this information is readily available as you go to preparing for this decision that you're making. Now, another choice other than hosting, so the hosting is by a subscription company, it's what we would call remote access capabilities. So you could continue to house your current software on the premises of your business. Whoops. Let's go back where we belong. Thank you. I get so excited. I'm like, oh, let's move through there. So we have remote access capabilities. It's when you have we have our software, your desktop software, on the premises of your business with access provided to each of your users. The users would be in the work it from home environment. And you do that with what's called remote access software, or you might have heard the term virtual private network. They're also called VPNs. It's a private data tunnel. So again, you'd have separate IDs and separate passwords for each user. And the remote access software may sound similar to Zoom, and we have a few of you that this is the first time you've seen Zoom. So Zoom allows us to visually work with each other. I can share my desktop, you can share your desktop. Some of the remote access software that I'm going to show here actually allows someone to work from a remote location with no one else triggering the access. So I could log into the system in the middle of the night and do any type of work that was necessary and then log back out. So PC Magazine, and again, I love to stay on top of what's going on. I love current events, so to speak. But some of the best remote access software, log me in, go to my PC, Team Viewer, and again, I grabbed a quick snip for your visual comparison. This has 4 of the best remote access software that's available currently. You can see the pros and the cons of each of these, and you can actually see the pricing. So you could compare this option. I have used Go to My PC and Log Me in the past. I've used TeamViewer the most recent and was pleased again with it. It was a little bit, it provided some jumping through the hoops for the security issues, which obviously we need at this point in time. But again, you're able to compare choices, and sometimes we get too many choices, and that's what I like to say. Here's the reviews, these are some good decent products, compare the prices, start with the least expensive first, right, if it'll work for you. And so these are subscription based, and they're per user. Now the challenge is if you no longer have your physical location. Some of you have given up a physical office. Some of you are working, you as an owner are working from home, right? So the primary location of the software could be in your home, and others then would have access to your system through the remote access software into your home system. And I would keep in mind that that creates a need for a very strong security for multiple ways and in multiple reasons, right? So another option, totally different than the first two, other than the hosting or the remote access logins, and you could consider that. And some of you are already using the QuickBooks Online. I know that some of you are here out of curiosity, is you could possibly, whoops, I have a little fast finger today, is that you could migrate to the QuickBooks Online version of the software. Now, this is a different software than the QuickBooks Desktop software. It looks different. It acts similar, right? Because it's still accounting software, has a bit of a learning curve. And if you're migrating your desktop software into the online, if you're converting your file, it should be done with the help of a qualified expert. Now, there are several versions of this software. And again, you can see the 4 that I've listed there. There's Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, Advanced. There's a couple more. There's Self-Employed. There's, somebody had mentioned the Quicken earlier. Quicken tends to be for your personal finances and also for your stock and bond portfolio, which it has a really nice integrated tool with the stock market. The QuickBooks Pro products do not have the stock market integration, which everybody seems to like so well. So when you're looking at even these 4, this conversation about choices is you'll want to evaluate the tools that are closest to duplicating your current system. And to be clear, what we would do is, let me make it clear, you would use either the QuickBooks Desktop software, either remotely, right, or hosted, or you would convert and migrate that software to the new version of software, which is QuickBooks Online. And we'll look at those details in just a few minutes. So when we talk, kind of setting the groundwork, I guess, here, but when we talk about the complexities of accounting and choosing the correct software for your company, a business accounting system is comprised of all these functions. Now, I showed you earlier a little diagrammatic version, right? It was earlier in the presentation. It was a picture with the circles and the accounting in the middle. I wanted to provide these to you in linear format because every one of them needs to have processes and policies with management and supervision. So admin needs processes and policies, IT, sales, your receivables, your marketing, your bills, your expenses. The whole list needs policies, procedures, processes, and supervision if you're converting to a work from home environment. It's not that we can just say, oh, look, we're just going to work from home. It's not quite that simple. And whether we consider all of these functions as part of your accounting, some of them we might consider part of operations, part of them even like part of sales, the sales department. My question to you is, who's going to manage and coordinate these functions as your employees learn to work from home offices? It's not automatic. It has to be very specific, very intentional, and very clear expectations. So do you need your employees to work simultaneously, like at the same time during the day? Or will they now have flex time to work as they prefer? Maybe they always had flex time. But what does that really, how does that translate into your company? How does that translate into your business? So what about the coffee breaks and the lunch hours and the time that they spend working? Who's going to manage the scheduling and the communications with others during this time? What will an approval process look like? And again, this is all part of your management, and your management policies that you need to think through is, what are the policies even when the internet's not accessible? What if the internet, we have these big thunderstorms, right? What if the internet's down? Is that an employer paid coffee break, or is the employee expected to make that up? It's one that's managed and scheduled by the employee. These different functions are going to determine all of your policies and procedures for your work from home employees. They definitely require new management skills and new management tools. It's a very interesting time that we're living in. So not only does that management need to become more creative and more flexible, but the accommodations for your work from home employees need to be thought through completely. The number of accounting and sales staff that you need. They may or may not need access to your software differently than they did in a home office. And that could change depending on the changing dynamics, right? Has the accounting software been on only one computer up to this point in time? Is it currently a multi-user version with server network access, right, in your office? How would you transition that scenario to a home office, your home office, or multiple people's home offices? So if you're considering the creation of a digital accounting office, where have the workspaces been? Do you have 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, 9 people, right? How much room is required then to replicate them? Where are they now going to be located? What if you just had the one server? Are you going to keep this at the office manager's home, your lead bookkeeper's home, your home? Is there room physically? Will the area be dedicated and secured physically? Will you need to purchase extra equipment, special equipment, extra computers? Will you need to create ergonomically proper work environments? How will you create, control, and supervise a safe and efficient environment at each accounting professional's home? There are just so many questions as we determine the logistics and outcomes of this decision, right? At the bottom of this slide, you see that I put a little note about the storage of the paperwork and the storage of the digital data. The decisions about storage, think about how many storage boxes. You know, every year we fill those brown storage boxes. You fill them, you throw them in the attic, you throw them in the back room, you throw them in the warehouse, in the storage. First of all, could you reduce those with the help of automation? Could you scan and digitally file all those accounting documents? Great idea. If so, how and where are you going to store the digital data safely, securely, permanently? You know, you have to keep records for, depending on your tax preparer's recommendations, up to 7 years, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. You simply must have storage capabilities for both the physical documents, you're going to want to keep some, and the digital documents. You can have digital storage also subscription-based. So basically you're paying rent for storage. And you can see the examples on this slide here. Citrix, Dropbox, Google Drive, Smart Vault. I have a client that uses Dropbox. It's a phenomenal tool for those of you who haven't explored it. I was shocked when he was walking through how he actually has his company organized in Dropbox. And not that it couldn't be done in any one of these. Okay. So we haven't yet gotten to the software distinction. We haven't yet gotten to there. I kind of have taken you the long way around because there's also a detour that I'd like to take you on as we discuss storage for the paper documents versus digital documents. I'd like to take us on a little side trip. It has nothing to do with this conversation. Dave's not prepared for this, so he's probably like, oh my God, what is she doing? Okay, but it's a data entry automation side trip. It's a little rabbit. We might call that a rabbit trail. Now, on my rabbit trails, we always come back to the main path that we were on, right? But as a business owner, we try to reduce redundancy and duplication. And I encourage you to automate as much as possible. And I know in years past, you always think that, oh, we're doing it double, we're doing it twice. Why are we doing it so many times? It's redundant, redundant, redundant. I hear this all the time. And so now is a perfect time to try to reduce that redundancy, the duplication, the extra work. There's just not much benefit for all of that. So if we even look at this slide, what does automate in our heads? Well, we'd see data from outside sources, external sources. We could enter it, we could review it, we could pull it down. We don't have to hand type all of that, right? You can enter multiple transactions one time and it's done. Yay, we don't have to do it over and over again. You can recall previous transactions. Hey, how did I put that in my records last time? Let's make sure we put it in there the same way. Like if you're going to make the mistake, at least make the same mistake over and over in the same exact way every time, right? At least because then when you go to correct it, it's all done the same way. Bank feeds, bank integration feeds. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Credit card feeds. Those are not fees, not charges, they're feeds, like feeding from the bank into your software, feeding and integrating, okay? And then of course, one of our automation is we want to maintain our reporting integrity. So as I go on this little side trip, this little rabbit trail, I actually want to show you some examples of automation, credit card receipts. So oftentimes I'm asked about using credit card receipts, right? Taking pictures with my phone. And how does that work? And how easy is it? And what does that look like for a relatively large company when you have multiple people that have multiple credit cards? Okay, so these pictures, the next couple of pictures are actually QuickBooks Desktop and Online. Both of the softwares have this capabilities, and this happens to be American Express. Not that I'm promoting them in any way, shape, or form, but you use your phone app to capture the receipt, and then you assign the proper account. You put it in the proper category. And there's no need to wait until the month end to key in the data manually, right? Again, some of you have bookkeepers in-house that are hand typing, hand keying. And automation tries to reduce that. So again, both the desktop and the online version have phone apps which capture the data. You can pick your accounts. They're called categories. So it's funny, in the desktop software, we talk about chart of accounts, and we're post to accounts. In the online version, they're called categories. They're the same thing. We're grouping like and similar type of expenses or like or similar type of incomes together. The receipt images are saved for 7 years. You can review the data. You can check it for fraud, validity, before sending it into your QuickBooks software. There's a full audit trail. You can't turn it off. It's there. It's on. It used to be you could turn them off. You can't turn them off anymore. And then you can set, there's other tools for setting spending alerts and reminders. This particular picture is also same thing, American Express. This is the statement. This is my bank integration feed that's coming into my QuickBooks software. It's an online feed. It's a feed, F-E-E-D, and we can assign the categories, we can assign the accounts directly in these integration feeds. And then the accountant, either you, your bookkeeper, or someone else can change them, edit them. You can import them all at one time if they're correct. And so, whoops. When we're looking at those, then at the end of the month, when you have your statement, you can look at your online statement. You can split those transactions, multiple lines. You include memos or little reminders to yourself for each of the split line details. You can batch edit your transactions. So batch editing means you can batch all at one time. You can validate the charges before sending them. And then the QuickBooks includes a URL link that's assigned to that receipt image. So again, I'm asked about these oftentimes, and I think they work quite well. And I appreciate you allowing me to share this example with you. It shows the possibilities that I'm sometimes asked about. But one caveat, one warning about these receipts that a friend and colleague, Don Kelleron, reminded me of was that when a business closes or shuts down, there is no central database. There's no central location for which to grab your receipt pictures. So they can be downloaded, but they're only downloaded one at a time. So if you're saving 3 years, 4 years, even 5 years of data, you have to go back and pull every receipt from the software by hand. Now that could change, right? The software is changing every time I turn around. If I say it doesn't do something, I even hesitate to say anymore, oh, it doesn't do that, because sure enough, they've improved it and it does change at some point in time. So your other option would be to continue paying the subscription fee for the software, whether that's desktop or the online version, until you just know that you no longer need to keep the file open, right? So thank you. I really appreciate you letting me take you on a little rabbit trail. That automation becomes an important part of how we create our accounting system and how we simplify things, and we make it easier, faster, quicker, better for you, your employees, for everybody that's dealing with our accounting and our reports. So returning back to our outline, the original outline where we had 6 components of this discussion, helping make this decision, it's one of communications. And communication's huge. So if your accounting staff are working from home, what will their communications look like with the other employees? How about with your customers? How about with vendors? How will you or someone, your management, be overseeing the communication activity? And oftentimes we don't realize how frequently we interact with other employees in a daily work environment. Sometimes it's a very, very brief moment to clarify a small point. How will this type of communication be handled with the staff working from home offices? Will you text? Will you use IMs? I have a client that processes payroll using text messages. Well, how easy is that? But what are the ramifications of that over the long term? How about the emails, the phone calls? What about emails that get lost? What about messages that are delayed? I had a message come through the other day. We were waiting for it. The call technically came in at 2:15. The message wasn't posted till almost 3, right? There's sometimes our phone systems just, that was Verizon, and sometimes it just works like that. Which ones of these are the least disruptive to you and to your employees as they're trying to continue to work? What questions can wait and be bulked together? Bulking together means, like instead of running and asking a question every 5 minutes, can we group these questions and make one email? Or can we group the questions, we bulk them together and we make one contact with somebody? Which of the questions need to be answered immediately? You know, you don't want somebody saying, oh, I would have asked you that, but I didn't want to bother you. I just bothered you 5 minutes ago, right? So those clarifications, taking your accounting system into a work from home environment with employees really needs to be thought through. So who's going to decide? Are you going to decide? Do you have management? Are you going to delegate those decisions? So it's interesting. Communications and management is going to be huge in our work from home environments. And the technology, I believe, is actually the least of the concern. However, a big concern for you will be the conversation around security. And security is without a doubt one of the most important issues when considering work from home accounting functions, right? We deal with people's money, we deal with credit cards, we deal with bank accounts. Huge amount of security and protection needs to go into this conversation. We need dependable Wi-Fi capability with appropriate levels of security, and it's going to be required at every one of your employees' homes, not just even the accounting person's home, but all of your employees' homes that log into that system. How are you going to onboard and train these new employees for that security? Do you have guidelines set up yet? How are you going to offboard? Nobody ever talks about getting fired when you've got, you know, your employee knows all your passwords, right? Your personal passwords. When you let that employee go, what's that going to look like? Who's going to actually do the password management? Who's going to restrict the access on the company computers when they're located elsewhere? You have 9 different locations. How are you going to actually restrict the access? So again, these are all the policies and guidelines that help you and your employees migrate to this new work from home in a successful manner. And because online security is so important, Dave and his board with NCET has scheduled a couple of experts the next few months to address the issues specifically security issues. Now, I don't want to share their thunder. I don't want to spill their thunder in advance. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of very basic points to make sure your systems are secure when moving your accounting functions to a work from home environment. Now, one of the easiest things you can do, it's a low-hanging fruit, and I love this slide. I borrowed this slide. I gave credit to the guy in the location where I borrowed it, but it reminds me to make my passwords very complex and very long. Look at that, 7-character passwords can be breached in less than a minute. I was shocked. You know, it's kind of the visual in your face. It's like, whoa! I knew that they were not quite as secure, but that spells it out in black and white, right? So passwords with 11 characters, you can see there. And how about 16 characters? Guess how many characters my passwords have? So it's a real eye-opener. I also got some professional help from a friend, an IT consultant, Brian DeMambro. One of the simplest suggestions that we discussed was requiring secondary verifications of my logins. And I will agree, it's how painfully annoying that is, yes? But what an effective, low-cost solution. And for those of you who are not quite sure, secondary verification is when you go to log in with your username and pass, then you are sent a separate code, usually to your phone, right, or to somewhere else. And with that code, then you have to type in the code as well. That's called secondary verification for your logins. It just makes it so that if somebody does break through those passwords, they would then need an additional way of getting into the file or the software that you're working with. So one of the additional conversations with security, and again, I don't want to go in depth here, is you'll be having the conversations with your employees as what policies regarding the personal use of work computers. I still run across clients who have computers at work, but they don't have computers at home. Okay, now, Dave and I work from home offices, and we have for years, so our work scenario is different than others. But are there going to then be restrictions for accessing other website locations? And what are the protections from phishing? So you may have policies in place for a work in office environment, right? We don't allow our employees to go to certain web locations during office hours. We don't want them sitting there and just shopping on some of the big box stores during the day. But how do you translate to work at home location or multiple locations, especially if the workstation or computer is available to others that live in that home office location, right? So again, policies and procedures around that when you have other people visiting on those workstations that are technically in their homes. So now each of the previous 5 categories in this conversation could easily be its own presentation or workshop. It's much longer than this 45 minutes. And many of you who have reached out wanting to know if QuickBooks Online is as bad as others say, right? Just throwing it out there. The answer is unequivocally no. It's not that bad. However, is it appropriate for your company? That answer may be yes. That answer may be no. The QuickBooks versions have similarities and differences. And again, this is not a sales pitch. Some of the software versions work better for some type of companies than others. And my clients use a number of different versions. We're talking about QuickBooks Pro, Premier, Enterprise, the online version, the self-employed versions, the Mac versions, and I support all the versions, and I've made my living as a business consultant creating and fine-tuning these softwares for many years. This is merely a conversation regarding the differences that I see in the software. And you could ask somebody else and they might see a different view or a different perspective of the software. Now, the basic accounting infrastructure is the same. The basic accounting infrastructure for QuickBooks of any kind is called double entry accounting. It is proper accounting. At one time, a lot of the more professionally structured accountants would say, oh, it's not double entry accounting. It is double entry accounting. It's just that we don't use debits and credits for the most part in QuickBooks. Double entry accounting is debits and credits. The software does function off of debits and credits, but you don't enter them. You enter things into templates, into pictures, into forms, and then that double entry happens behind the scenes. So the software versions, the difference in the software versions, they're just a little bit different for some users. And again, we're very visual people. We're very visual learners. And sometimes if we can't always see something in the way that makes sense to us, we may struggle a bit. Now, if you've been using the QuickBooks Desktop version and you migrate or you move to the QuickBooks Online version, that may be a little bit of a learning curve because visually it's different, where somebody, like a couple of you mentioned, had just started using the QuickBooks Online, you didn't know. So you didn't know there was a difference visually, right? So sometimes we have that going for us as where we don't know what we don't know again, right? So Intuit, that's the company, the developers of QuickBooks, they're very committed to providing a robust work environment for all companies with the QuickBooks Online in the cloud software, and they continue to expand its capabilities regularly. There are a number of overall general benefits of cloud-based software compared to the hosted or desktop version, regardless of which software you use. Even if we're not talking about accounting, just cloud-based software has some advantages, right? For QuickBooks Online, we have anytime, anywhere, online access, round the world access, real-time, multi-users, multiple users with different levels of access. The data is hosted, backed up to a secure server. I've only known Intuit's servers to go down a couple of times in my 25-year career as a consultant working with their software. So it's hosted, it's updated. There's nothing for you to continue to update. You don't have to keep track of when your subscription is going to expire, right? I run into that all the time. Somebody will say, with the cloud-based version, you generally have 3 years, especially if you're running payroll, or if you have some sort of integration, and people will wait right down to the last wire, and then they're like, oh, I have to update my software, it's cut off, it's not working. Well, so you do have to keep track of those deadlines and when it needs to be updated. So with the cloud-based version, there is none of that. It's constantly upgraded. And when I say constantly, again, things can change week to week in the cloud-based version. I kind of chuckle sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know that wasn't there last week, right? So there's a constant improvement of that particular software. There's no expensive equipment. You can log into the QuickBooks Online with your phone. The app version in the phone is a little bit different than logging in on the website in your phone. Just to let you know. And then it is available, the QuickBooks Online. I can be on a PC, you could be on a Mac, somebody else could be on their phone, right? It's readily available to all of these operating systems and devices. So there's also software-specific benefits of one version over the other. Both change, both improve regularly. So any of my slides at any given point in time, any specific time, may be outdated before my presentation's even finished. So in this case, these are examples of QuickBooks Online features that are not in the desktop version. And again, some of those, I'm not going to read the list verbatim, but you can do some automatic emailing of reports. You can automate invoicing and batch invoicing. A technical detail that I love is that I can have multiple accounts receivable and accounts payable entries in one journal entry. That is a limitation in the desktop software. And again, you can have multiple budgets. You can have some delayed charges going on. So there are, and actually there's some new features where you can run multiple businesses in a QuickBooks Online account, which is nice. Up to this point in time, you needed to have separate subscriptions for multiple businesses. Now, in the QuickBooks Desktop, there are features that are not in the online version. And there are advanced features in the QuickBooks Desktop, and a lot of them would be used frequently in a larger or more established company. And QuickBooks Desktop may still be more effective for enterprises with complicated manufacturing, construction, costing, specialty businesses, nonprofits. And keep in mind that this changes regularly. 10 years ago, a fraction of my clients were on QuickBooks Online. And now probably 70 to 75% of my clients use it. And even some of the larger companies are starting to use it. Some of the engineering companies, some of the construction companies who don't do detailed costing yet, right? So it is changing, it is improving. And when making the comparison between the software packages, whether the desktop or the online, the cloud-based version, and that's decision that you're wrestling with of whether you can even use QuickBooks Online or whether you want to use QuickBooks Online, you might want to keep in mind some of the current importing limitations of the QuickBooks Online. So if we were taking our QuickBooks Desktop file, if we had an existing desktop file and we wanted to convert that into QuickBooks Online, there is a size limitation. And again, you don't need to be jotting notes. These are all be given to you, this whole PowerPoint will, but it has to be less than a certain size with a certain number of targets. And you can find that information. The function of 2key gives you that information. If you have lists like your customer list, your vendor list, the items that you sell, your service list, all of those, your chart of accounts list, when you've created a QuickBooks Online file from the beginning or from an existing, if you ever want to import any of those lists, you have 60 days. After 60 days, you can no longer import. You'd have to do something a little bit different with those. If you have multiple currency turned on, you cannot import that file. And it's a little there's a little irony there because you actually can't turn multi-currency off in the desktop software. So if you have multiple currency on, there's just no way to turn it off and use that as a QuickBooks Online file. You'd actually have to start a new or a different file. I have trouble recommending converting a file with extensive inventory. If you have some inventory, if you have your inventory in good, solid condition in the desktop software and you're thinking about moving it to QuickBooks Online, that's doable. But if you have extensive inventory, if you have assembly builds, if you have some grouping of your inventory, there could be some issues in that conversion. So the other challenges I found in the past, and again, I've worked with the software for many, many years. I'm one of the, there's 300 trainer writer network members nationwide for Intuit, and I've been one of those for over 20 years. I do a lot of training, a lot of writing for Intuit. And what I have found is that there are some data issues when importing those desktop files into QuickBooks Online. And there's very specific instructions to follow to make sure that all the data is interpreted and integrated properly. So if you decide that you want to convert from the desktop, it's not impossible, right? We do that type of work, but you'll absolutely want to prepare your file in advance and follow the checklists in a focused sequential manner. And if that's not your forte, then hire professional help. So in this case, and you can see the list that I've made there, is I've had some payroll and payroll conversion issues. Sales tax sometimes doesn't come through properly the way that it, your payments, your liability payments, if they're not posted accurately to begin with. Your inventory groupings, there can be challenges with anything that's memorized transactions, memorized reporting, memorized budgets, memorized sales templates, right? Some forms, some estimates. Some of those just refuse to come in and then you have to rebuild them from the ground up. It's okay as long as you know that going in and you're prepared for that, right? So this portion of our conversation is based on how many components and how sophisticated your current QuickBooks Desktop software is and whether it is easily imported or converted to the QuickBooks Online. Now, part of the conversation, part of our discussion is when you're converting the software, whether it's capable of fulfilling all of your needs. And there are some very popular apps for QuickBooks Online. The base software may not mold itself exactly to your process and your operations in your business, but I can pretty much guarantee that you will find an app that will emulate what you like to see. And I'm not going to read these apps for QuickBooks Online, but I had a client the other day that was looking for a very specific app that worked in a very specific manner, right? And so we turned to this particular location to actually review those to see if we can find something that tweaks an app and tweaks the software so it works in accordance with her processes in her business. Now, keep in mind that if you have QuickBooks Desktop software and you like QuickBooks Desktop software and you want to keep that desktop software, but it doesn't work exactly like you'd like it to, and you're not interested in moving it to the cloud-based version, right? We like it, we're using it, we're going to keep it. The third-party marketplace has been in existence for ever since I can remember, so 20, 25 years. These are also apps that integrate with the desktop software, and they're usually searched by industry or by the business need that you're trying to fulfill. So again, there's solutions and solutions for a variety of solutions as we start examining what works best for your company. And one of the things I like to share with you, and again, I've seen a lot in my years of working with business owners, apps can be fun. Apps can be a lot of fun, and they can give you high hopes. You're like, yay, that's going to work well. However, apps can also be difficult to integrate correctly within the softwares. And I like to recommend that you make sure you have a plan and think through the ramifications of adding an app on top of the software. So I've worked with companies where one division insisted on one app, another division of the company insisted on a different app, and of course by the end of this process, neither of the apps, none of these two apps coordinated, nor gave anyone any valuable information. It was a huge redundancy in the workload. It just wasn't very effective. Thank goodness I got involved in that and was able to smooth it out a little bit better. Another example of an app that wouldn't work properly was one of the ones we saw a few minutes ago wouldn't function off of invoices in QuickBooks, but it would only function off of sales receipts. And in QuickBooks, there's a difference between invoicing and sales receipts. It's a very subtle difference, but it is there. And so the app wouldn't function off of the one, but it would on the other. This particular company needed the invoices created first because of their packing and shipping operations. So you have to do your research. You'll want to do your research. You want to test the app. You usually have 30 days, right? 30 days free on the app. If it doesn't work as you need it, uninstall it, and then be sure to unsubscribe. Otherwise, you continue to be charged. I just had a previous client. We were trying to unsubscribe something that he'd signed up to 5 years ago and had never used. So again, and it was continuing to be charged on his credit card. He just didn't pick up on it, right? So make sure you unsubscribe. So one caveat to changing and when you're changing and learning new software, if you're brand new to the software, if you're changing to a different type of software, just remember it's never instantaneous. Some of you love and you embrace learning to new technology. Some of you accept it as a period of growth, both personal growth and professional growth. And other team members are going to begrudge you the time that it takes to learn new steps and techniques. So part of my questions to you is, do you and your accounting staff wish to be learning new software? This is a stressful time. It's a very stressful time for a number of reasons. But if you are hectic, crazy, busy, it may be a major factor in your decision, right? If you are slow and there's some downtime, then this may be a great time to learning new software. And QuickBooks Online has a minimalistic visual presence, which can create an extended learning curve that new users may become frustrated with. Once the particular nuances are learned and accepted, the user satisfaction increases, and I have several client testimonials to that particular fact. So my counsel to you, one-on-one, if we were sitting in my office having coffee, remember that the economic recession is a stressful time already. Moving to work from home environments with your accounting office or your accounting division is going to add a layer of stress. Creating the new policies and procedures for each of those functions is going to add a layer of stress. Adjusting to new management styles, new techniques. You're going to be accommodating physical and digital workspaces, physical and in the cloud. You're going to adjust to different communications with employees, vendors, customers. What is that going to look like? You're going to be exceptionally cautious about security and passwords. Learning new accounting software usually requires us to run dual systems side by side until you're comfortable that the new system is a true substitute for the old system. Bet I surprised you on that one, right? Adding new apps complicates your system initially, ultimately helps increase the level of satisfaction. Now, the decision to take your accounting functions to work from home environment is truly a complex one. So let me know if you'd like some professional assistance in either making that decision or implementing it. It's best to have that well thought out plan, and I'm glad to help you with that. Now, I have attached additional slides to this PowerPoint that I'm not going to show you today. There are slides 37 to 54. They're for your personal research as you're making these choices and decisions. I know that NCT will make these available to you. And if you happen to be on this webinar and you need to create a simple, efficient, effective accounting system without spending a fortune, and it sounded like a few of you could use some help with that, I'd like to invite you to join me for my pilot program where you can learn the nuts and bolts of creating your own system. And I'm creating this program for business owners that are not particularly accountants with no debits and credits. It's my first home study program I've created in over 8 years. I've been consulting since that time on a one-on-one capacity. And I'm creating some video trainings to help more of you by leveraging my expertise and knowledge. And if you can dedicate 30 minutes a week for 5 weeks, it's not very much, creating, understanding, and fine-tuning your accounting system, this program is for you. And I promise absolutely no debits and no credits. If you're interested and you'll commit those 5 weeks, 30 minutes a week, feel free to drop me an email. It's up there on the slide. Let me know that you're interested. Thank you again, Dave Archer and NCT, for hosting these free and marvelous learning opportunities for our business owners. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much. What questions, or do we have time for questions, Dave?
Yeah, we have time for questions, and if you could unshare your screen, please, so we can see you.
There we go.
And I know Lou had a question. Which QuickBooks should you get for multiple businesses?
The QuickBooks Online works for multiple businesses, and the QuickBooks Desktop, both. Can you hear me, Lou?
Yeah, I can hear you. I had to unmute myself because Dave muted us all. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
I'm so glad. That was great. Thank you, Marie. I do have it online, and I've only used it a few times. Now I'm looking at, wait, I had it. Which one, the simple start or essentials? I mean, I could see really the only difference was the users. So I guess I have to get essentials if I want a bookkeeper to use it. Why is plus? What would be the advantage of plus? It just seems that it's just a track profit. Project profitability. I mean, I'll know if I make a profit. I don't need that. And track inventory, maybe I need that, but not really, not my business. But I have other businesses that I'm starting, e-commerce businesses. So maybe I want to track the inventory.
So I always suggest that you start with the simplest and grow into the next level, right?
Okay. So then I'll do essentials. That's it.
Right.
Thanks.
Right. And so then you get your feet on the ground, you get balanced, you understand how something works in a simple and easy environment, and then you grow from there.
Yeah, I had essentials, but I think I made it lapsed because my credit card was frauded, and that's what happens.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well,
I have a question. It might be.
Marie, oh, go on.
Go ahead. This might be kind of specific, so I apologize for that. But I've been using QuickBooks Self-Employed.
Yes.
And part of the reason I was here today is because one day I was told by one person you need desktop, the next online. If I'm going, is there a way to migrate the information from Self-Employed?
No. And so I tended to avoid the topic of self-employed today. It is very helpful for people. I have a friend who's a realtor that uses it, and it allows you to separate your business from your personal, even though you're using the same bank accounts for that. Mm-hmm. And I found that it worked very similar to Quicken, very easy, very at the basic level, and yet for business owners that are very analytical, it didn't give us that capability of the reporting that we wanted. And self-employed, I don't believe will actually allow you to upgrade into the QuickBooks Online. I can double check that for you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there were limitations on people using it. We're not able to migrate that into a next level.
Shoot, I wanted a different answer, please.
You know, I have a magic wand, and I last time I brought my magic wand, but go ahead, next question.
Marie, you know I hate the interface in the QuickBooks Online version.
I know you do.
And I don't know if you hate it as much as I do, especially if you work quick. If you're doing a lot of data entry and you want to get done quickly, there's really no substitute for the desktop version, I think.
That I would agree, and your challenge is that you're using data entry. So what we're trying to do is automate and bring all the data in from the bank feeds and the credit card feeds. The lag time in using the mouse, for me, is the biggest component of that when I'm using QuickBooks Online.
Yeah.
Because there is no lag time in desktop because you get so good with the keyboard shortcuts, right? So my favorite still for many companies is the desktop. But again, I support and use the online.
Oh, I do it all too. I was kind of hoping you had it aligned to the developers, but I don't think you do.
You know, I've tried that several times and it hasn't seemed to be real effective. So there is in your art, there is in your software in the upper right-hand corner, you can actually send feedback to them. Now I've been sending feedback for 25 years and I haven't gotten a response yet, but I think that all the improvements that I've suggested over the years have all been implemented just because of me making those recommendations.
Great. Well, no more questions. Thank you all for being here. Marie, thank you very much for sharing all of that. And I will mail out the PowerPoint tomorrow along with a recording of the video. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Marie will be happy to talk to you one-on-one.